A great power is a sovereign state that is recognized as having the ability and expertise to exert its influence on a global scale. Great powers characteristically possess military and economic strength, as well as diplomatic and soft power influence, which may cause middle or small powers to consider the great power's opinions before taking actions of their own. International relations theorists have posited that great power status can be characterized into power capabilities, spatial aspects, and status dimensions. Sometimes the status of great powers is formally recognized in conferences such as the Congress of Vienna or an international structure such as the United Nations Security Council. At the same time, the status of great powers can be informally recognized in a forum such as the G7, which consists of Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, the United Kingdom and the United States of America. The term "great power" was first used to represent the most important powers in Europe during the post-Napoleonic era. The Great Powers constituted the Concert of Europe and claimed the right to joint enforcement of the post-war treaties. The formalization of the division between small powers and great powers came about with the signing of the Treaty of Chaumont in 1814. Since then, the international balance of power has shifted numerous times, most dramatically during World War I and World War II. While some nations are widely considered to be great powers, there is no definitive list of them. In literature, alternative terms for great power are often world power or major power, but these terms can also be interchangeable with superpower. Characteristics. There are no set or defined characteristics of a great power. These characteristics have often been treated as empirical, self-evident to the assessor. However, this approach has the disadvantage of subjectivity. As a result, there have been attempts to derive some common criteria and to treat these as essential elements of great power status. Early writings on the subject tended to judge states by the realist criterion, as expressed by the historian A. J. P. Taylor when he noted that the test of a great power is the test of strength for war. Later writers have expanded this test, attempting to define power in terms of overall military, economic, and political capacity. Kenneth Waltz, the founder of the neo-realist theory of international relations, uses a set of 5 criteria to determine great power: population and territory, resource endowment, economic capability, political stability and competence, and military strength. These expanded criteria can be divided into 3 heads: power capabilities, spatial aspects, and status. Power dimensions is noted above. For many, power capabilities were the sole criterion. However, even under the more expansive tests, power retains a vital place. This aspect has received mixed treatment, with some confusion as to the degree of power required. Writers have approached the concept of great power with differing conceptualizations of the world situation, from multipolarity to overwhelming hegemony. In his essay, French Diplomacy in the Post-War Period, the French historian Jean-Baptiste Durozel spoke of the concept of multipolarity. A great power is one which is capable of preserving its own independence against any other single power. This differed from earlier writers, notably from Leopold von Ranke, who clearly had a different idea of the world situation. In his essay, The Great Powers, written in 1833, von Ranke wrote, "If one could establish as a definition of a great power that it must be able to maintain itself against all others, even when they are united, then Frederick has raised Prussia to that position." These positions have been the subject of criticism. Spatial dimension. All states have a geographic scope of interests, actions, or projected power. This is a crucial factor in distinguishing a great power from a regional power. By definition, the scope of a regional power is restricted to its region. It has been suggested that a great power should be possessed of actual influence throughout the scope of the prevailing international system. Arnold J. Toynbee, for example, observes that great power may be defined as a political force exerting an effect coextensive with the widest range of the society in which it operates. The great powers of 1914 were world powers because Western society had recently become worldwide. Other suggestions have been made that a great power should have the capacity to engage in extra-regional affairs and that a great power ought to be possessed of extra-regional interests. Two propositions which are often closely connected. Status dimension. Formal or informal acknowledgement of a nation's great power status has also been a criterion for being a great power. As political scientist George Modelsky notes, the status of great power is sometimes confused with the condition of being powerful. The office, as it is known, did in fact evolve from the role played by the great military states in earlier periods. But the great power system institutionalizes the position of the powerful state in a web of rights and obligations. This approach restricts analysis to the post-Congress of Vienna epoch, it being there that great powers were first formally recognized. In the absence of such a formal act of recognition, it has been suggested that great power status can arise by implication, by judging the nature of a state's relations with other great powers. A further option is to examine a state's willingness to act as a great power, as a nation will seldom declare that it is acting as such. This usually entails a retrospective examination of state conduct. As a result, this is of limited use in establishing the nature of contemporary powers, at least not without the exercise of subjective observation. Other important criteria throughout history are that great powers should have enough influence to be included in discussions of political and diplomatic questions of the day, and have influence on the final outcome and resolution. Historically, when major political questions were addressed, several great powers met to discuss them. Before the era of groups like the United Nations, participants of such meetings were not officially named, but were decided based on their great power status. These were conferences which settled important questions based on major historical events. This might mean deciding the political resolution of various geographical and nationalist claims following a major conflict, or other contexts. There are several historical conferences and treaties which display this pattern, such as the Congress of Vienna, the Congress of Berlin, the discussions of the Treaty of Versailles which redrew the map of Europe, and the Treaty of Westphalia.